Will we see a significant trade with the Montreal Canadiens in the coming days, moving the Carey Price contract, which could set up another move to acquire a number 2 centerman? We'll discuss the contract for Carey Price, where it could end up, and some of the names we're hearing that the Montreal Canadiens may be targeting. Plus, we have some updates on Luke Hughes and his RFA contract negotiation with the Devils, the latest on Connor McDavid's extension with the Edmonton Oilers, and it appears as though another NHL veteran might be heading overseas to play in Europe. All that and more coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. As I mentioned, we have a variety of things to take a look at here today. We're going to focus on the Carey Price trade and some other players that the Habs appeared to possibly be targeting here as a secondary effect on the newfound cap space. But we'll get into that here in just a moment. I want to touch on a few other quick topics here. First, it appears as though we have another longtime NHL veteran player who's most likely heading overseas to play in Europe. 13-year defenseman Calvin DeHaan appears though he's heading towards playing in Sweden in the SHL. Of course, we've seen him play in a variety of teams here in recent years. Of course, played with the New York Rangers a bit last year. Obviously, it was quite a well-known situation, making some comments about how things went down, how he was treated there. That certainly garnered some headlines. And the veteran defenseman's having trouble getting himself a contract for the upcoming 25-26 NHL season. It sounds like there might have been some opportunities for him to either have an AHL contract, possibly a PTO or two-way deals, but nothing firm at all to guarantee himself a spot in the NHL. So his agent is working on looking at some options in Europe, and there is a potential we could see an announcement here in the next few days of him signing in Sweden. So we'll see what happens, but his days in the NHL might be coming to a close. I know veteran defenseman Tyson Barrie, who announced his retirement the other day, did an interview on the radio not long afterwards and was asked about what went into making his decision, and he kind of joked that this decision was made in conjunction with all 32 NHL teams, basically meaning nobody was willing to sign him, so he, at the end of the day, called it a career and decided to hang him up rather than pursue playing in another league or a lower level or anything else in Europe, etc. But yeah, veteran defenseman certainly having a tough time here as of late getting some work, as it's becoming a younger and younger league here all the time. Of course, some updates on a couple of big contracts that we're kind of waiting to see how things play out. But New Jersey general manager Tom Fitzgerald recently conducted an interview with Jimmy Murphy of RG.org talking about the Luke Hughes situation. And you don't often hear GMs admit this, but he does admit that, seeing a Luke Hughes holdout missing training camp or even part of the regular season might be a possibility. As much as he says the situation, kind of sucks if that happens, he says that he and his agent Pat Brisson, who represents Hughes, are trying to avoid that. And he understands, though, that when a player in this kind of situation, when they're a restricted free agent, they don't have arbitration rights just yet, this is really the only leverage that the player has to kind of continue negotiating, trying to get what they want, is to withhold services. So as much as he hopes that doesn't happen, he admits that it is a possibility. Clearly there's some gaps to be bridged here between the team and the player. So the latest intel and reports suggest that it's more, I'm not sure if it's a term and a money issue or more so just a term issue, but the team is certainly not really crazy about the idea of his contract matching his brother Jack and them expiring at the same time. I think obviously they would be concerned about, what's the possibility that they lose both players to free agency at the same time. That would be a big blow to the team. Secondly, a lot of teams like to have their top contracts kind of all staggered coming up in different years if they can help it. You can't always do that, of course, and players obviously hold a little bit of leverage on what they're willing to sign for, so it doesn't always play out that way. But if the team gets their way, they certainly like to have things, from a structure business perspective, like to have things so that there's not too much coming up in any one given offseason, making it a little bit easier to handle things and putting the team in a situation where they can best manage their salary cap obligations. But clearly, that's the rumored right now, is that the Devils want either a short bridge deal, 2 to 3 years, or they would like to go the 8 years, which obviously would put Luke Hughes, expiring a couple of years after his brother Jack. Jack's already a few years into his long-term contract, and right now he would be set to expire in 2030. So it was believed that Luke Hughes wants a 5-year deal to match the expiry of his brother. Like I said, I just kind of wondered what the future could hold for Quinn. We know he's signed for this season coming and one more in Vancouver, so essentially would be a 2027 expiration right now. Lots of speculation on his future too. Kind of wondering if there's any chance these three brothers try to line things up to all be free agents at the same time. We know that there's lots of speculation. They all want to play together. Clearly, Jack and Luke already do. Hard to say what happens or if there's any kind of things going on behind the scenes that way. But obviously from New Jersey's standpoint, they'd probably like to not have Luke Hughes hold out. So we'll see if they can bridge the gap. And it's also been, it's not always the case, but oftentimes when players miss camp and go into the season late, they generally doesn't set them up for good success. Look at Jeremy Swayman, case in point, last season. This seems to happen a lot, but you do get the odd exception where players will come in late and kind of just roll with it and end up having a good season. But we'll see where it goes. Of course, Connor McDavid still getting lots of headlines and will continue to do so until he signs a contract with Edmonton, assuming that does indeed happen, like most people expect. We talked yesterday. Yesterday was the first time we had heard that there was speculation he may not sign at all before the season starts and will be very likely to go into the season without an extension. But update today from TSN's Ryan Rashong says that while that certainly is a possibility, he does believe that they are still trying to work away at this contract extension and that nothing's really been decided yet between Connor McDavid and his agent Judd Moldaver, and that they very well could end up coming to terms with the Oilers before the season starts, or maybe even ahead of camp. You just never know. There's still lots of time, but at the end of the day, McDavid and his agent need to be ready to proceed and move forward. I think the Edmonton's probably quite willing to probably give him whatever he wants. At least I would suspect that when you're dealing with the best player in the world and you have a great relationship between, obviously, like I said, ownership has treated Connor quite well. We know the long relationship he's had with his former agent and now, CEO of the team, Jeff Jackson. So, obviously I do wonder, they've gone back-to-back years, unfortunately losing in the Stanley Cup final, but, I understand from McDavid's perspective, he wants to win more than anything else. Like, that's his burning desires to get a Stanley Cup under his resume here, but is there really a better option than the team who just went to the final 2 years in a row? I'm not so sure. And obviously we know, like I said, he and his wife are really tied to the Edmonton market now. There's the closeness with the Draisaitl's. Like, I just don't see him leaving, but I can understand that he's going to drive into hard negotiation to get what he wants. And like I said, I don't think it's about money and term. I think McDavid will get whatever the heck he wants. And any team like the Oilers would be pretty stupid to not just say, okay, what do you want? Here, sign here. But it's going to be more about the other things that he wants when it comes to the team, to be the confidence that they're going to be able to win and compete year after year like they have the past 2 years. And even though they've gone to the final past 2 years, I guess you could probably make an argument as well that on paper the team might not be as good this year. I mean, maybe they will be, but there's a lot of X factors, a lot of unknowns, unproven players that are going to be expected to play big roles. And maybe they have a great year, maybe they don't. That's the big uncertainty right now. I don't know that you can honestly say that the Oilers had a fantastic offseason. I mean, there's some moves that were made that could pan out, but only time will tell. But like I said, a little bit of, I guess, optimism from Rashog saying that it's not a given that he goes into the season with no extension. I've seen an update from David Staples as well. He's pretty confident still that McDavid will get a deal done before the season starts, knowing that as much as he says that he doesn't want to be a distraction, I think McDavid's smart enough to know that if he does start the season with no extension, I don't care how much he tries, it's going to be a distraction. I don't think there's any way around it. But we will see where that goes. Now, tomorrow is the beginning of a new month. Of course, what happens in September? Well, we get training camps later in the month. So we're getting closer. We're getting into that home stretch of time before we get hockey back for another season, the 25-26 season. And the training camps are not too far away. But another big piece of business is expected to be completed in the coming days. September 1st is a big, meaningful date for at least one team in the NHL, and that's the Montreal Canadiens, of course, who have a bit of a cap situation they're trying to deal with. And we've heard some rumblings throughout the parts of the offseason that once the Carey Price signing bonus, which is structured a little bit unusually, being paid on September 1, that we should very likely see a trade of that contract to another team, opening up new possibilities for the Montreal Canadiens. But to be honest, it's not just about opening up new possibilities. It's also helping them go through these cap gymnastics that they have to become cap compliant. So ultimately, Carey Price is going to be into the final year of the contract, and he's got a signing bonus of $5.5 million, which will be paid out to the player as of tomorrow, September the 1st. That will be a major stepping stone to being able to trade the contract, because teams will have the big cap hit and a heck of a lot less cash owing, and a big chunk of it is covered under insurance anyway. So it's really very little money out of pocket, but it takes up a lot of room on your cap, and for some teams that is a really big deal. Like Montreal, right now they are approximately just shy of $6 million over the salary cap. Now, of course, to become cap compliant, like before a contract can go on LTIR, you have to have it be cap compliant on the books first, and then you put it on LTIR, and then you can do a recapture that money through other contracts. So in the past, they haven't had as difficult of a time getting through the gymnastics and the maneuvers to be able to be compliant with this contract on the books. Usually they were only $1 or $2 million over the cap. They always had a few players, especially during this rebuild. A number of players would be on their ELCs or still during that phase where they're waivers exempt, so they didn't need waivers to go to the minors. Move a couple of contracts down for opening day, and then you capture that in an LTIR. You can recall them. Now you're at LTIR and you're compliant. But right now, there's $6 million over the cap. Getting rid of that kind of money to become compliant for opening day would be extremely challenging. You'd have to end up moving another veteran contract, whether it be Matheson or Line or Josh Anderson, or all the names that we've kind of heard some rumblings about. But at the end of the day, I don't think Montreal really wants to trade any of those guys. So this is going to be complicated, but this will open up a new possibility. We've also heard rumblings for weeks and months about that number 2 center spot with the Montreal Canadiens. And to be fair with their cap situation, after everything else they've done, I think they've kind of planned far ahead, saying, okay, we really can't do anything else until we get to the point where we can move that Carey Price contract. Now, there are some that believe that they already have a handshake deal, and that after the bonus is paid, we're going to see a trade shortly thereafter. I'm not sure if it's going to be tomorrow. It might be within a couple of days after. Hard to say. And then from there, that will open the door for a part 2, a 1B part of that deal, where they can make another move and acquire another NHL player. Now, that may not happen right away, but it's possible that it might. So we know that essentially, the Habs have been linked to be looking at a number 2 center role for extended time. There's a number of players I'm going to mention here in a minute that we know that some of these names that we've looked at before, a couple are newer names that I don't really have any rumors to say for sure that they have talked or looked at these players. Just some players that I've kind of wondered about that have been kind of had their own kind of situations going on that could lead to a trade. But ultimately, we know the Montreal Canadiens, to pull off this type of trade for a number 2 center, if they're going to do it, they really don't want to subtract from their roster, right? They had a little bit of a surprise season last year. Let's just be honest. They made the playoffs, but there's still a lot of their stats that were, a little bit underwhelming. Still some work to be done. They had a minus 20 goal differential. So there was lots of improvements. They had a nice season. Lots of things to be happy about, but there's still work to do. And to get back into the playoffs, I think is going to be, it's always even harder the next time around, right? So, getting this number 2 center spot solidified is going to be important. Now, of course, we know they have Kirby Dach, and Kirby Dach is a major X factor. We also don't know with any kind of certainty at all that he's even going to be ready to start the season. That's also a little bit of a problem. If you're Montreal, you're probably worried about that for a couple of things. One, like, you don't want to have a slow start. You can't win the Stanley Cup in October. You can't win it in November either. But I tell you, between those 2 months, if you have a bad enough start, you can really set up your season to either be over with early or to make it super hard and even more challenging than it needs to be down the stretch to become a playoff team. Now, Montreal last year, they spent a large part of the year out of the playoffs, and they slowly kept building and worked their way in. And they had times where they were in, then they were out, and they were in, and they were out. But it was never really solid and firm grip that they knew for sure that they were going. Came right down to the wire. So a slow start this year wouldn't really be ideal. It's never ideal for anybody. But when you're a team like them, and any of the other teams that are kind of those bubble playoff teams, if you will, they're going to be in the mix. You know that there's a decent chance they might make it again, but you also know it's going to be harder. There's lots of teams coming and gunning for them. After what the improvements we saw out of Montreal last year and in Ottawa last year, like, there's going to be other teams that are going to be trying to duplicate that and come for them. Whether you're the Buffalo Sabres or the Detroit Red Wings, or the Islanders are looking to bounce back, the Rangers are looking to bounce back. Will the Bruins be as awful as they were last year? Can they be better? There's lots of teams that are going to be trying to have something to say about that. So obviously getting a better, good start and having this situation dealt with sooner than later is probably best for the team. Now, the teams that have most likely been mentioned where Price's contract is going to go, the team with the most noise around it, according to Marco D'Amico of RG.org, is the San Jose Sharks. Now, the Sharks make a lot of sense. Right now, they're cap compliant, but they're only $5 million above the cap floor. So, you look at these teams, like, that's why the Price contract for some of these teams that are going to be lottery teams, it makes more sense for them because they are going to be selling off assets later in the season. It's pretty much a given that the San Jose Sharks, the Blackhawks, a few other teams here are not going to be anywhere near the playoffs. And from the midway on point of the year to the deadline, they're going to be selling off assets to recoup what they can, because those players are not going to be in their plans moving forward. And sometimes those deals get complicated because they need to get to the cap floor. So they might be talking to teams saying, yeah, okay, we'll trade you that player, but I need a contract back because I need to get to the cap floor or I'm not compliant. And sometimes that's hard to do. So right now the Sharks are $5 million over the floor. So they don't have a lot of room. They also have 9 players that are on expiring contracts, pending UFAs. Out of those 9 players, there's a decent chance they might move a good amount of them. And they probably will prefer to mostly get back younger players, picks, prospects, build for the future. They might take on the odd contract here and there, but really, they'd rather probably be in a situation where they don't really have to. And getting Price's contract on the books will allow them to have a bigger gap that they're not going to be at risk to dip below the cap floor. Now, the Chicago Blackhawks and the Pittsburgh Penguins are the other 2 teams that are mostly been rumored around this as well. It makes sense, especially if you're Pittsburgh now, because here's the thing. The 2026 NHL draft is viewed upon as being very deep and really, really good. So teams that are going to be in the lottery are going to probably want to make sure they're in a situation to get the best pick possible. So if you're Pittsburgh, and I know you got Sidney Crosby, and he wants to be competitive, and I'm sure this is all difficult on him, you could see the Penguins, with a slow start especially, sell off, because they had a bunch of veterans right now that they're rumored to be looking to move. Nothing's materialized yet, but as we get into training camp and we get into the early part of the season, Raquel could move, Rust could move, even Malkin could move, Erik Karlsson could move. You get all this talent that's going to probably go to other teams, and it could really weaken the Penguins to make sure they have best shot at tanking for Gavin McKenna. Like, I can totally see Kyle Dubas taking that route. So, getting this Price contract on the books will also give him more flexibility to not have to take back too much money. So that's why they're all kind of, doing that. Chicago and Pittsburgh, like San Jose, also have a bunch of players that are on pending unrestricted free agent deals. And in the Penguins' case, they also have players, like I just mentioned, some of which are not pending UFAs. They might have an extra year or 2 on their contracts, but they're rumored to be available as well. So we could see those teams shed a lot of money. And that way, They're just in a better spot, so they don't have to take back a bunch of contracts. The 2026 draft, like I said, is going to be really good, and teams want to have a highest pick as possible. A lot of teams have been reluctant to move their first-round pick because they want to be in on this draft. They don't know. What if they're like another team was like Nashville and really surprises in a bad way and really bottoms out? They're going to be like, okay, if we're bottoming out, we're going for it all. We want to have Gavin McKenna, right? So at the end of the day, I think you're going to see a lot of teams probably start selling off earlier, especially with it being an Olympic year. You get the roster freeze around Christmas. I think we could have a situation for the coming season where there's almost like multiple trade deadlines. That to me makes sense that we could see that. So I think we could see some teams selling off early to start the tank process. I really think that's a real possibility. So ultimately, the Habs, by trading Price, will be in a better spot to be able to go after this number 2 center spot. We know that they, like I said, with Doc, if they have to go into the season and give him a shot, they will do that. However, like I said, there's no guarantee that he's even ready to start the season. So we've heard a couple of teams that they've been talking to. We know that they've been linked to a couple of the centers in Boston. We know the Bruins have been linked to looking to move one of them. So whether it's Pavel Zacha, Casey Middlestat, one of those guys probably moves in the not too distant future, whether it be before the season or early in the season. That wouldn't be shocking in the least. And you could probably make an argument that they both could make sense for Montreal. They have also, now another player, hasn't been specifically mentioned a lot with Montreal recently. There was some rumors earlier in the offseason, and his name has been out there for a bunch of teams, but Seattle's Jared McCann is another name to watch. There's some that think that Seattle may not even trade him. That might be the case. Maybe it really boils down to what the offer is. Now, I don't know that Seattle, though, will take a futures return if they do move McCann. I think they're going to want a player who can help them now. Montreal may not want to do that. So McCann might be a tougher deal for them. Whereas Boston, I think, would be more likely to accept that futures type of return, given where they're at right now after kind of hitting rock bottom last year. So they could probably work out a deal with them. Then you've got a team like the Blue Jackets. I wonder about this team. We've heard about Charlie Coyle, who ended up there in Columbus by way of Colorado. You know, another player that Montreal knows well. So I'd keep your eye on him. And another name in Columbus that I kind of wonder about as well, who can play center, and he's also a winger too, so he can kind of do both. And his name was out there for some other bigger deals that the Blue Jackets were reportedly working on, but never were being able to be successful to complete, was Dmitry Voronkov. Voronkov could be a real good player. You know, I do wonder about him as a possibility. And another name who's unsigned right now, and a team that's also kind of rebuilding on the fly, a little bit, not quite the rebuild we saw Montreal go through. I'm not sure really how to describe it, but the Calgary Flames have been kind of rebuilding, retooling, if you will. And right now they've got a player, Connor Zary, who's unsigned. Now, Zary, I'm not sure is the perfect player. He is also listed as a centerman and a winger. I think he's mostly played wing at the NHL, so may not even be the best fit, but he's young. His age fits. There's enough about him, about how he plays, it kind of fits. Might not be ideal, but I'm not sure. We haven't heard that everything's too contentious between the Flames and Zary to get a deal done. So it's hard. I just wonder because of his situation being unsigned, if it gets to the point where they could swap him. But again, Calgary's got to get some young talent. They got some veterans. You know, they're probably going to move Rasmus Anderson. That's not going to obviously help Montreal. Montreal's not going to be where he goes. We pretty well can say that. But like Zary, if they're going to move him, which I don't know that they will, I'm not convinced they will. But if they did, they're probably going to want a player back of similar age, similar skill level. And I don't know that Montreal is going to want to do that. So again, a name that I want to keep an eye on just because of the situation. And I know he signed a contract for 3 years, but I do wonder about Marco Rossi too. Now, I mentioned before, I wondered about Rossi because of the fact that he is such a smaller player. Would Montreal really prefer to have, somebody a little bit bigger? Because they don't have a lot of size down the middle. I mean, Nick Suzuki is not an overly big guy. Jake Evans is not an overly big guy. it probably wouldn't hurt to have somebody be a little bit bigger, a little stronger down the middle. So again, do they want the small statured Rossi? Talented player, could be a good fit with Demidov, but I don't know that it's the ideal player. So again, either way, regardless of who they target, the price contract being moved will allow a subsequent move to happen for the right price to target one of these guys, and we could see what happens. I do honestly wonder that Zacha might be the primary player they're looking at here. I can't say that with certainty. That's just a gut feeling. It brings in somebody with a little bit of size, a veteran player. Could be a good kind of placeholder. He's a little bit, he's not old, but he's older, right? A little bit older than some of the younger players. So, could be a guy to play for, try it out for a season or two and kind of see where things go before some of their other younger guys are even in a spot to take that role if they're able to. So let me know what you think in the comments, but it does sure sound like we're going to see a Carey Price contract trade over the next couple of days, and then it opens up some more moves for the Habs afterwards. Let me know your thoughts on that, as well as the other guys like McDavid and Hughes down in the comments, and we'll discuss further. If you're new to the channel, of course, make sure you subscribe and stick around. We'll keep you up to date with all the news, rumors, and analysis of all 32 NHL teams. Thank you for watching, and I will catch you next time.